Hello YouTube, hope you're having a great day today. Today I want to take a look at another short story by M.R. James. In this case, we're going to be taking a look at Lost Hearts by M.R. James. It's also published in the same collection that the Count Magnus and other things that have been published in from the Penguin Classics, so I'll be linking you to that here at the end. I do have his works in some of his other ones. For example, Lost Hearts is also in this one too. It's just a random sort of Great Tales of the Supernatural collection from a few years ago, more like a few decades ago, but you get the idea. So M.R. James, in case you're not familiar with him, is a writer who wrote a number of horror short stories. That's basically his genre that he's known for today. He published about 15 or 16 of them during the course of his career, and there are he appears in many different places. One of his short stories, Count Magnus, is considered by many to be one of the most influential and strongest horror stories of all time. For example, H.P. Lovecraft put him in for his top 10 list for the best short stories of all time, and lots of other people think that Count Magnus is really good too. M.R. James was writing mostly at the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 1900s, and so his horror tends to be very much more grounded, rooted in reality, and so forth. He was definitely more of an erudite person. He's somebody who's a professor over in the UK. He was an antiquarian himself. He was obsessed with knowledge and learning and research and so forth. He loved that history in particular and so forth. So he loved that sort of thing. He was a theologian. So he studied theology, the early history of the church, lots of things like that. And so he's considered very strong academically, but he was also very much kind of a self-confessed antiquarian. And so he kind of is one of the first people who writes these horror short stories that are going to influence probably a generation, where he writes about a lot of these sort of these antiquarians. And you're going to see that again here in Lost Hearts, as one of our main characters is actually an antiquarian, and so forth too. Now, his short stories tend to be between 12 and 20 pages long. He doesn't have a lot of them, and so forth. Lost Hearts today, though, was self-published in a collection he did in 1904. Not that dissimilar to Count Magnus, which I've already gone ahead and done a review for you. So after this, I'm actually going to link you to my initial review of an M.R. James work, that's Count Magnus, which he's probably more well-known for. Both of these were in the same self-published collection of about 5 or 6 short stories that he self-published in 1904. Of those, I think this is probably one of the better ones. I actually like this one a little bit better than Count Magnus itself, actually. That's probably... So let's take a look at kind of what happens in Lost Hearts. So I'll get you about half of the way through. His short stories tend to be between 12 and 20 pages. It won't take you too long for you to read them from a modern context. But so in Lost Hearts, it's going to be starting in the about 30 years or so before the story's being written, and in it we're going to have this boy who's being brought into his house by one of his family members as he approaches his 12th birthday, and he is going to be taken in and brought in and so forth, and you're going to have him come into this big old house with this person. It's this big British house and so forth. He's going to get a chance to learn the local staff, the people that are working there, the guy who's brought him in too, they're all super nice towards him and such. After he arrives, he begins to experience these strange sort of visitations and mystical things that are happening and so forth. He also hears about 2 children that had previously been brought in that have sort of died under strange circumstances that may very well be haunting the house and so forth. And basically what you're going to be doing for most of the story after that, of course that's only going to be 2 or 3 pages in, you're going to find that out. You're going to be exploring from the boy's point of view what's happening, what the kids are, and so forth, and what wound up happening, and what kind of haunting is happening, and those sorts of things, like a traditional sort of ghost story. And then you're going to have it kind of end, and you're good, and move on. Now, I do like what the story does, like what M.R. James does in this story. M.R. James is having a very gifted sort of writer, crafting a good, strong horror scene. I also think that he's really good at a short story. He understands the importance of a short story, especially from horror. It's much easier to write a horror story from a short story than it is from anything else, because the longer your thing is, the harder it is to sustain horror. So he gets you in to the horror very quickly, into the plot line and so forth, and then he gets it to the sort of the main point very quickly too. So I really do enjoy that he does that, and so forth. So there's no surprises you're going to see. M.R. James in a review like this, because again, my channel is really much concerning about horror, fantasy, and science fiction classics. Of course, this is a guy who has Count Magnus and some other things. He's still regularly published in horror anthologies to this day. So taking a look at some of those things, there's a Penguin Classic that collects all of his horror short stories. Again, that's who he is. So it's not a surprise that you're going to see some of his stories here. I may do one or two more for you, but again, I'll link you to the collection so you can check them out yourself. Kind of review of himself. So are you familiar with M.R. James? Have you read Lost Hearts? I'm happy to sort of talk with you more about it. What did you think about it? Did you agree or disagree with kind of my concepts? Thinking that I actually like it a little bit better than his more classic Count Magnus. But happy to engage you with that more and talk with you about that more and so forth. But I think it's better well written, and it's in the same collection. So, so it's not like you know, people who hadn't at the time, if you were reading Count Magnus, you would have read his whole collection, right? Because it wasn't like they were being published in magazines or pulp or anything. He just self-published them. Anyway, but so I like it. I think it's a strong story, and I'm happy to lead with it as kind of the second story of M.R. James that we're talking about, and so forth. So are you familiar with him? Have you read his stuff? I'd be happy to engage you with it further in the comments below. And hey, look, if you watched this video all the way to the end, I want to thank you for taking some time out of your day, because we all have such busy days and such busy lives. So the fact it took like 7 or 8 minutes and spend them with me is something I really do appreciate. And hey, while you're watching this video, if you liked it, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Again, we're going to be trying to bring to you a lot of those sorts of classics from the old days. And so if there's something in there that you liked and so forth, you're probably going to get a chance to see a whole lot more older things out there for you too. Once again, have a good one.